Who wants to be a director? Everyone's hand shot up. Who wants to be a writer? Everyone's hand shot up. Who wants to be a producer? No one, not a single person. So I kind of just like, yeah, sure. And my lecturer said, well, the interesting thing about a producer is you are the only person who starts at the beginning and finishes at the end. Everyone else comes in for bits and then leaves. But your job is to see it through its entire creative process. And that to me was like, yeah, okay. I like the sound of that.
Welcome to Content Kingdom. This is your backstage pass to the people, tools, and the trends shaping the future of content marketing.
So, Tom, what the hell does a producer actually do?
That's a great question. Wow, that's okay right off the bat.
There we go.
Here we go. Okay. Well, look, I think that is one of the biggest confusions, frankly, both not only to the general public, but also within the industry itself.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think, historically, producers were owners, right? So when the studios first started 100 years ago, the producers were the Warner Brothers and the people who owned Paramount and all of those things. So they were owners who were creating story. They had a roster of directors, actors, the kind of the old-fashioned Hollywood studio system. That these days has transformed significantly. I define myself as a career producer, which is to say I only make my money from films or TV shows that go into production.
Okay.
So within that, a producer is the person who finds scripts, develops scripts, stories, brings on a director, brings on the actors, raises the money, makes sure that the production goes smoothly, on time, on budget, delivers that project to whatever studio, streamer, distribution company has bought it, helps through the marketing and distribution of that project. So the problem and why I laugh when you initially asked that question is there are now lots of different types of producers. There are actors who say they are also producers and put their name on things. There are directors who do that. There are financiers who do that, all of whom are kind of, cover certain aspects of what I consider the producing role to be, but don't do the everything that someone like myself, tries to accomplish. So yeah, sorry.
Well, so I guess when you think about what makes a producer really good, what do you think is the hardest part of being a producer?
Well, I mean, the hardest part, right as the market is right now, is casting.
Yeah.
But I think, in a more holistic sense, I think it is seeing the overall and really having the tenacity to have a project that other people are telling you doesn't have value. And you being like, no, I think that this deserves to be made in some form and be out in the marketplace. So we can kind of dive into either version of that. But yeah, I think it's Hollywood right now is in a huge state of flux. The business, overall. And so where do we fit in the new world order as producers? How do we continue to get product that people want and people want to see? Is, an ever-changing, evolving thing. And I think that's one of the things that is both challenging and interesting in what I do.
All right. So, to me, because I'm a little bit removed from this, I'm more in the tech world and than I am in media and entertainment. What you're describing is really what an entrepreneur does, right? An entrepreneur is someone who, gets the people, gets the money, and gets the vision, gets the product, and puts it all together, and then markets it and gets it sold, right? Like that's your classic entrepreneur. And you really sound like one to me. So, right now you're saying the biggest challenge is casting, and what a surprise! Talent, getting talent for the money you have is the thing. But you also said something else that I think is really cool, which is that you think the toughest skill is the tenacity. And I can tell you there have been so many moments where I've wanted to say die on something, and having that grit and fortitude, or deciding, this is really a waste of my time. I got to let go of this one. Those are hard moments. So I would love to hear a story about a time when you had that tenacity, right? When you stuck with something and the world was like, no, this is dumb. You shouldn't be doing this, Tom. You're wasting your time. And you stuck with it and it turned into something. What comes to mind to you?
I mean, quite honestly, most of my films have taken 4, 5, at times 6 years to get made, and have gone through multiple iterations of what it could be. And I think so. I have a lot of those stories.
Every single one.
Yeah, pretty much. It's I think it's, look, to your point about being an entrepreneur, and I think this is true of any business, is you have to believe in your core thing, right? Whether that's a widget or a piece of art or whatever it is, you have to have constant belief in the core thing. And in my business, that's the script, right? You have to believe that you have a great script. And if that is the case, and if you're getting that feedback from investors or talent, and for whatever reason it's just not lining up, because it really is kind of 3-dimensional chess to kind of get the talent and the money and everything kind of in line, then that to me is really the distinguisher between this is something I'm going to keep pursuing versus, okay, I maybe need to put this in the drawer, or even drop it entirely. If I'm getting that feedback of this script is good, then you've just got to keep on working the mechanics and picking the lock to get all of the things to line up to unlock it. And so that really has been my kind of guiding light. And, I did a film, actually the film I'm doing right now, called Double Blind. It's a commercial thriller, terrific script, and I've been putting it together for, well, where we are now, 6 years. So we've now made it, and we're in post-production, and we have a studio that we're doing it with and all those things. But we had, I think this is my 3rd director on it, and certainly my 4th, maybe even 5th kind of grouping of cast that we put together. So it was, but everyone kept saying, this is a really great script. This is a really cool script. So I just kept on, you just keep on battling.
So when you think about what a career producer really brings their talents to bear, we've talked about this, and I'd break this up into 3 parts, right? There's everything leading up to the shooting, right? All that work, the raising the money, the finance, all that stuff. There's the shooting, and then there's post, before you go out to the market. Where do you think you add the most value?
Well, I think it's the beginning, to be honest. I mean, because technically, you don't actually need a producer on set for a film to get physically made.
True.
We're really there to help problem solve, talent relationships, those sort of things. But we are not physically required on set for a film to get functionally made. So I think that's kind of a bonus. But I think in discovering IP and discovering stories and nurturing those stories, and then kind of collecting that creative talent to try and get it made, I think that's really, if you kind of had to put it into percentages, I think that's probably 65% of it in terms of kind of value add, and then obviously, post and distribution. A lot of that these days is now out of our hands. A studio or a streamer has final cut, has final decision. We're still in those conversations, but ultimately, the kind of the higher power generally has kind of, will have final say. So I think it's probably kind of a downward slope in terms of value. That's not to say that we don't have input, but I think, the generation of scripts and ideas, and I think is really where most of our value probably comes.
Okay. And so if you could go back in time to the start of your career as a career producer and give yourself a piece of advice, what would you say?
I think I would say no more.
Just say no. You're on
no
Nancy Reagan already told you that, man. Like you just weren't listening. So
it's true. I think because at first I was literally having a conversation with a young producer about this yesterday. There's no stepping stones to being a producer. There's no you can get to it so many different ways. It's not like a director who will probably work in production or in the camera team and then go make a short, and then that short, then you make another short, and then you go make your small first. It's not really about that from producing. It's really so at the beginning of your career, you're really trying to kind of show value add, right? You're like, oh, I can help you with this, or I can help you with that. That's why I need to be attached, and that's why I need to get a fee and all these things. And so I think I attached myself to a lot of things that ultimately I wasn't creatively excited about, because I just needed stuff to be attached to. I needed stuff to do. And actually it didn't help the project. And at times, caused rifts with other producers or other creatives, because I wasn't excited to get out of bed to do it. So I think having the balls to be like, no, not for me, but thank you so much, and maybe we can find something else, is really hard, because obviously you're also trying to make a living and you're trying to make money. And but yeah, I think that's what it would be.
There are a bunch of situations I think like that come from other industries. Like, so the classic one is trying to become a brain surgeon, right? It's like, who wants to be the first guy under the knife of this brain surgeon? And you're like, not me, right? So everybody wants to know that I'll go to a brain surgeon that's done brain surgery before.
That's the best,
but if that's the case, then there's no such thing as a new brain surgeon, right? So,
sure.
In my business in tech, I mean, the biggest problem is you bring a piece of tech to market and they're like, well, that's awesome. Like, who's using it? We're like, you are, and they're like, no, I'm not, that's not going to happen. And it sounds like what you're talking about with being a producer is, hey, to get command of your first ship, and like to say, I'm going to produce this one and I'm the top dog on this thing. Getting the confidence from somebody to do that must be extraordinarily hard. And yeah, like, you said that there's no graduate, graduations to like step into this role. It's not a promotion. It is just a complete elevation. So, Tom, maybe you could tell me about the first time you had total control over something, and how did you get there? How did you get it done?
Yeah. So, well, actually it's it also kind of speaks to what we're talking about. So, I moved to LA. I've been an executive at something called the UK Film Council in the UK, which is a government body that helps finance and fund British movies. It's a cultural incentive, essentially.
Cool.
And I had learned a huge amount, but I kind of hit my ceiling there. And I moved to LA for personal reasons, and I got introduced to this group of guys who had a script that was based on a novel. The novel was called Life at These Speeds. The film eventually was called 1 Mile to You. And it was just a lovely kind of family drama about a boy who's a cross-country runner, whose girlfriend and teammates and coach all die in a bus accident. And he has to kind of recover and kind of get through it all. And I was introduced to the two producers, and I was like, look, I can raise money. I knew a lot of financiers from my time at the Film Council in England. And the one thing that I have learned is kind of knowing money begets money. So, you kind of meet one person who's got some money, and then they introduce to someone else who's got some money. And so that was really kind of my value add, was bringing the financing and international sales. again, from my time in the UK, I kind of really got to know all the respected sales companies. And just so you know, the sales companies are the people who kind of take your project out to distributors around the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of and sell them to independent. Obviously you can sell to a studio who has theaters everywhere, but generally in the indie space, you're selling to indie distributors who are kind of niche in each country. And so that was my value. And what was, we ended up making the film in Mississippi. Budget was like 4.5, I think, something like that, gross. So we had a Mississippi tax credit on it, and then a finance plan. But what was really fascinating, so on that film, I was working with a really terrific gaffer who is the head of the lighting department. Award-winning gaffer. And we're sitting there kind of in between setups, and we're chatting, and I said, how many films do you do a year? So, well, these days, maybe 2, sometimes 3, kind of depending. He was an older gentleman. And I was like, wow, okay. It's like, so in like the last 5 years, you've made more movies than sets I've been on. And he's like, yeah. It's like, wow, okay. Yeah, so what does that tell you? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, technically you're my boss. I said, yeah. He goes, but I've had thousands of hours of more set experience than you. I was like, yeah. He's like, so right. So what does that tell you? I said, get out of the way. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's right. Because my job on set anyway is to be helpful, is to let everyone do their job, and to really only, put my hand up if there's a problem that needs to be fixed. So yeah, I kind of came in it from a different angle, more the kind of financing side. But that jigsaw puzzle of how you put it all together, that to me is what I've found fascinating.
Yeah, it does sound like it's a creative part in its own way that has nothing to do with the actual creative of the script and the lights and the directing and the cut and all that other stuff. It's the creativity of which people and where are we going to do it and how much is it going to cost and can we sell this and who's going to want to watch it and all that type of stuff is really kind of the
what's really cool, David, and the reason I kind of, because I didn't know what a producer was when I went to film school. I kind of did, because I would watch the Oscars and they would always get the final best film always went to producers, and you obviously see them, but I had no real understanding of what a producer did, to your first question. And when I started film school, there was I think 75 of us in the class or something. Who wants to be a director? Everyone's hand shot up. Who wants to be a writer? Everyone's hand shot up. Who wants to be a cinematographer? Half of people's hand shot up. Who wants to be a producer? No one. Not a single person. So I kind of just like, yeah, sure. And my lecturer said, well, the interesting thing about a producer is you are the only person who starts at the beginning and finishes at the end. You see it all the way through. Everyone else comes in for bits and then leaves. But your job as the producer of the film is to see it through its entire creative process. And that to me was like, yeah, okay. I like the sound of that. So
am I supposed to take away from that story that you became a producer just because you couldn't stand to have the vacuum of nobody raising their hand in the film school? Is that?
Well, sure. I thought you were going to say that control freak. I mean, probably a bit of both.
All right. Yeah.
But yeah, I the idea to me of writing an incredible script, right? Spending years of my life writing this incredible thing, and then having someone else go and fuck it up. Like I couldn't deal with that. I want to be the one who at the end of it goes, you know what? That's on me. For good or for bad.
You want to be the one to fuck it up.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't know if I told you this. I have a sister who's a writer, and she writes rom-coms for Netflix and Amazon and whatnot, and she sells them to them. And I could never share my text string back and forth with her because it's definitely off color about her frustrations with what they're doing with her scripts, But in the end, I don't know, they turned out to be pretty good movies. So that's good stuff. But Tom, I think you brought up a couple of other issues here that I think are really interesting, which is, and one of the ones that I want to ask you about, and I will tie this to the content in a minute, but you said that, I'm only going to raise my hand on set if I can see that there's a problem. And otherwise I got to trust the gaffer, trust everybody else to let them do their job, get out of the way,
Yeah.
That's all great. That's a gray area though, right? There is definitely is it so obvious to you when there's a problem that you are ready to stick your nose in versus I got to let these guys work it out? Do you have some guidelines? Because I think that is something that happens in my business all the time where it's I don't know what the tech team's doing. I'm not happy with this, but I'm going to let them do their thing. I don't know. It's tough I struggle with that of when do I step in? When do I stay out? Do you have any guidelines on that?
Yeah. Obviously I think that does come down to the 1,000 hours thing. I think the more you practice it, the more you can get ahead of it. You can kind of see, kind of what's coming down the road. But because actually, filmmaking itself is a very functional thing, right? In terms of you have a certain number of days and you have a certain number of hours within those days. And there are very clear union guidelines as to what you can and can't do. So every day really is, a very kind of structured thing in terms of how many pages are you going to get done and how are you going to achieve it. So from that sense, it's actually, I think, quite easy to see how things are, problems that could arise from a scheduling perspective,
okay.
Right? Because if say you get to lunch and you're not where you're supposed to be, that's a very obvious, clear thing. You're right, I need to go speak to my first AD. I need to speak to the director. What's going on here? Okay. I think it becomes, I think that becomes harder when you're talking about the creative, right? If you have a director who maybe is not communicating with actors in a good way, or actors who aren't getting on, or which is much more an emotional issue than a functional thing. So I personally pride myself in having really good story knowledge and really being able to understand story in a way that if a director is struggling with their own vision of it, or in their way of it, getting their ideas out to crew and cast, I can help step in and help solve those problems. On the flip side, I'm not a technical person. I'm not good with lenses, camera moves, those type of things. Okay. So I think it's really, in my profession, it's really kind of knowing what your strong suits are. But again, I think it's the actual act of filmmaking. It's some of that, let's say you're in the car industry, it's a functional thing, right? The car moves along the conveyor belt and different bits get added to it. And if something gets missed or lost, then it's very similar in filmmaking, which is why actually it's a lot more boring than people think. The act of filmmaking.
So from a producer point of view, what I'm hearing you say is you establish some key performance indicators about the progress of the development, the mechanical development of the film. So many shots, so many days, so many scenes, so many things. And if it starts coloring outside the lines, it's really clear and obvious because it's not a judgment call. It's we had a plan and now we're outside of the plan, so we have an issue. Exactly, which is great, right? I mean, that you've taken something that to me sounded nebulous and now you've broken it down into something that's really concrete. So you've made it concrete. And then the gray area for you around the technical part is just, that's not your strong suit. So you're just going to take the trust fall that the other people who can do that will do that part. But when it comes to story, that's an area you feel like is part of your intuition. And so when you have an intuitive feel that maybe story is not getting told the way that it should be told, then you feel like you can step in. Am I recapping all that?
Yeah, I think
correct?
I think that's fair.
Okay.
I mean,
All right.
also, because you're never really shooting in sequence, right? That's very,
Right.
very rare.
That always blows my mind.
Yeah, that you should.
You guys are able to do that.
Yeah, so to be there and to help a director and go, hold on, I think that person's, if you think about it in the story, he's supposed to be angry, and he's not playing angry because the director's got so many things to think about, right? And I think something that could be helpful to the people. I mean, to understand, film is a director's medium. Fact. TV is a writer's medium, and theater is an actor's medium. So within that, the director has to film, which is really what I do, has to oversee everything. And so my job, and I think it kind of puts a finer point on what I was saying to you before, is my job is, to support that director in their creative vision within a box of time and money. Their job as a creative is to push and flex that box creatively as much as they can, right? Because they want everything. They want the world to make their movie.
Yep.
But I cannot let that box break. I can let it bend and push, but it can't break. Because to your point, otherwise then you're off, you're over budget, you're over schedule, all of those things. And that means I'm not good at my job.
Well, that is another creative tension that I can deal with. The engineering product management teams almost always want more budget, more resources, more time, more all of that to build the product of their dreams, right? That's going to be awesome. And somebody's got to say, we need to ship, we need to get this to QA, we need to get this to delivery, and we need to go. So do you have any tips in general for when you hit those moments of disagreement, right? Where the art and the business are now colliding at full speed? How do you mitigate that? How do you work that out? What are your techniques?
Well, I think the simple answer is the business will always win.
Yeah. I mean, I like that one.
I mean, I think it's true. I mean, it's called the entertainment business. And I joke all the time. There's a line from Monica in Friends when she says, rules make games fun. And I kind of subscribe to that. I think the creativity you actually find within limitation is extraordinary. But the reality is that if we are not on time and not on budget, no one's making a movie again. Who's going to trust you to make so within that, my default is always going to be business wins. And so let's be creative about whatever restrictions and limitations we've been given, and actually play and have fun. Because the best days that I've been on set is when we've been up against it, and you see everyone just get creative on how to achieve what needs to be achieved. It's been there's been some really extraordinary moments of watching collaboration and creativity, because they're like, shit, we've got 3 shots to do and we've got time to do 1. What are we going to do? And that's so to me, it's, again, in my role, it's business will always win.
Okay. I like that. Well, speaking of the business and it always winning, you and I in the pre-show were talking about intellectual property, and I want to talk a little bit about that because you brought up, I quite frankly had not paid attention to backrooms, and I was like, oh man, kind of caught me in the blind spot. So that's why we have a pre-show, right? So I went out and saw it this weekend. Yeah. And thank you. I'm never going to set foot in IKEA ever frigging again. It was terrifying, but I got the backstory on that. And I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about intellectual property and how powerful that was for Kane Pixels, and what he's done there with that. But also just for movies in general, you talked about the script being everything. Is it now that the script and the IP are everything, or how is it changing?
Well, I mean, obviously, everyone knows that kind of there are certain IP that has always been highly valued, right, within Hollywood. I mean, look, the rise of Marvel and the comic book movies. I mean, they had tried comic book movies before, and there have been certain success. The Tim Robbins, not Tim Robbins, sorry, Tim Burton Batman's. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans have been relatively successful with Sam Raimi, but nothing to what Marvel has become.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is timing, and kind of so there is kind of traditional IP, comic books, novels, those type of things. True stories are always going to have a level of value. But I think in kind of, as I mentioned, the kind of the changing flux of my business, what is IP? I think is an interesting question. And also, what IP actually has value? Because Backrooms is a great example. This guy built this, this world on YouTube and had huge followers. And so there was a self-generated market from that. Now, look, he went and made a really great movie for very little money, but I don't think that film gets made 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, because the finances couldn't see it as to what that IP value is. But my God, they see it now. I mean,
yeah.
So, I think traditionally we were always told, oh, it needs to be a book, it needs to be a play, it needs to be a comic book. These days, I think being able to just go, okay, who is this for? Who is my audience? And if you can turn around to a fan and say, well, I've already got some of my audience because of this, that has real value now in a way that I don't know that it did before. And it's almost a necessity. So, yeah, sorry.
I'd like to unpack that a little bit because I did some research for this, and about 3 million people had interacted or watched King Pixel's shorts before he got the contract. So he's 16 years old at this point.
Yeah,
3 million people watch this short, and somehow he negotiates because he's the director of the actual. So A24 gives this kid $10 million to go make this movie, and God knows what's in that contract, but I hope he got some residuals. But here he is selling $100 million. And do you think that this has happened? Is that the real reason? Like, is because he had the audience beforehand, there was enough brand recognition that when he started to market the movie, he had a pre-built audience in the word of mouth. I mean, is that the model here, or what happened?
Yeah, it's a coalescence of a bunch of things, right? I mean, but yes, A24, I don't believe are making that movie without seeing the fact that there was already this fan base to plug into. Obviously, then it's a conversation of value versus worth in terms of how big a swing are we willing to take financially that these 3 million will connect with the film that's then made. So, and obviously A24 is kind of known as a brand. It has its own brand. It's very kind of cool indie. It fits within this model. So it all kind of combined. Because look, one could argue that Kim Kardashian is her own IP. Now, has anyone put her in a movie? Not to my knowledge. I mean, she started doing TV, but there's a huge conversation about casting and social media links and all of those things. And does that actually bring you value? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So it's a continuously kind of evolving thing. If you put Kylie Jenner in your movie, how much of the 200 million followers or whatever it is that she has are going to go, yeah, I want to go see that. That's, that's a risk that some people are willing to take.
So do you think this is making movies more creative or less creative?
I think it's making, I don't know if creative is the word I would use, but I think it's creating opportunity.
Okay.
Because I think people are now willing to, if you are, it's all about value versus worth, really. What you're putting together does that have the value for how much you're asking to make it? And I think that has become an acute issue in what we do, in the sense of, back in the, you could make somewhat decent movie and DVD sales would pick it up and you would be fine, or streamers, even before streamers, studios would overspend because they could. Now there is no bottom. If your film does badly, it can just just power drive into the floor. There was a great interview actually with Jason Blum after Annabelle 2 came out and really underperformed. And it was incredibly brave interview actually for someone who has had pretty much a ton of success. And to sit there and be like, okay, wow, we really shat the bed on that one. And to kind of sit and look at it and go, why did that happen? And, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially they went out over their skis in terms of value versus worth. And so if you have IP in some way to kind of show value, I think that's incredibly productive.
And, I think that is getting to this question of like, where is there value, and is it just the audience, or what kind of value is there? I mean, going with a little bit more traditional IP than what happened with Backrooms. George R. R. Martin kind of lit everything up with HBO, with with Game of Thrones.
Sure.
And but then when you compare that, I don't know if you're familiar with the deal that was done with Brandon Sanderson. Do you know who Brandon Sanderson is?
I know a bit about it. I don't know a ton.
Okay, so I happen to know, I have kids who love Brandon Sanderson, so I know more about Brandon Sanderson. So I got interested in this. So here's the deal with this guy. This guy is just he is a Mormon writer who writes science fiction and fantasy. He's written about 20 books.
Okay.
He has the world's largest Kickstarter that he did, like in the middle of the pandemic. He announced to his audience on a Kickstarter on a Friday. He said, I've written 4 books. I'm going to sell them direct to consumer. Here's the packages. And by Sunday, he'd sold $21 million worth of books.
Wow.
Yeah. Biggest Kickstarter ever. And then he has his own trade show. So he has a conference in Salt Lake City that he does in early December every year. It's sold out. 5,000 to 10,000 people attend the conference to spend 3 days hanging out with this guy. And I don't know exactly. I was trying to find the number. And I don't want to start a rumor that's unsourced, but I thought that he sold just the first 2 books to Apple for something like $90 to $100 million. And he gets, director rights on this. And, to your point, I mean, that's definitely, the guy's got some IP, right? I mean, you can definitely see he's got IP lined up. Right. But to your point, did Apple overspend on this is, I think, the more interesting question, because this thing's got to be bigger than George R. R. Martin times 100 in order for it to make sense, right?
Well, I mean, look, I don't know enough about it to talk about kind of the creative side of it, but you've got to imagine that Apple were obviously doing kind of cost analysis on where they get that number from. Now, obviously, maybe they could well have been going up against some other studios and streamers who kind of lifted the price. But yes, I mean, look, that is critical data of value versus worth. So there are times when it does get totally out of control. I mean, when you see Sundance movies that get bought for 3 times, a number that just doesn't make sense in terms of how are you going to recoup this. So of course that happens, but I think that that happens in every industry, certainly creative one. A piece of art is made, and for some reason, someone decides it's going to be worth $10 million. What the fuck just happened? So look, I think that's possible, but from my perspective, the question now is. I've said it before, I'll say it again, is who is your audience? And is that a theatrical audience? Is that a streaming audience? Is that a YouTube audience? Is that a how are you going to cut through the noise to get to, whoever you're trying to get to? And that really dictates your budget. And then can you achieve what you want to achieve within that financial constraint? It's pivotal now. So I think I spend a lot of time not only going to the cinema and watching what other movies are out there, but talking to my kids. What are they watching on YouTube? I was the least surprised person in the planet to how well Minecraft did. I mean, of course it was going to do that. I mean, just talk to any 9-year-old and all they did was play Minecraft. And it's like, and you had Jack Black, who's the voice of Kung Fu Panda that they all grew up on. It's like, it's not quantum physics.
Okay.
So now what they did was they made a good movie, and, Barbie, no one wanted to touch Barbie as a piece of IP, but they got a terrific director and, lead actress who's also a producer, and they made a really great story. So, look, there are ways of fucking up IP. I mean, look at Masters of the Universe this weekend. I mean,
that was interesting because it's really old. I mean, that's old IP. I mean, that was old when I was a kid. I mean, that was like kind of, and I'm not exactly a spring chicken. So
again, I think that's well, exactly. Who's the audience? Who's going to go see that movie?
Yeah, I've got zero desire to see that movie. So
I mean,
I didn't know who the
I
audience
had zero
was.
desire to see it. So
yeah,
I think that's really interesting. But also remember, obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but there really are only a certain number of genres in my business. Mm-hmm. So you're making an action thriller, or you're making a romantic comedy, or you're making a drama, or so within that you are kind of, the IP can even be the genre itself. Does that make sense?
It can. Tom, I know we're starting to run tight on time, and there is one topic I want to pivot to that I really want to get your thoughts on, and it's the topic that everybody's talking about right now, which is just the role of AI in every industry. And I'm curious to know, like, and I want to narrow this down so it's not such a broad question, but I have a daughter who likes to act. Thank God, most of her stuff is in theater. So I don't know, to the extent that theater's not dead, she probably will have a vibrant career there. But, if she were to go into film, what's happening with, like, should I tell her not to do it because it's all going to be AI generated characters? What do you think is going to happen?
No, I don't think. I mean, look, there's a couple of things here, and obviously it's a big question. But so that specifically, my industry has some of the most powerful unions in this country, not only within my business, but in all of America. Mm-hmm. And if you think SAG, which is the Screen Actors Guild, is going to allow AI to take over, you're out of your mind. Is it going to be a tool? Absolutely. Can it be a form of animation? Absolutely. Did everyone start freaking out when Disney started doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? No. So I think that there is absolutely a place for it on that side of the camera. I think there's a place for it on my side of the camera. I think, helping, again, from a budgetary perspective, and allow things to get made that maybe couldn't get made because of the lack of technology. Yeah, I do. But I think, I joke about, or half joke about actually my role in all of this, in terms of, if you want to know what scary AI looks like, it's pushing out producers and replacing them with AI. Because if you want a director who's trying to show their creative vision, or an actor who has a question and we're not there to answer it, but you have an AI instead, I don't think that's going to go well. So, I think it's so new and fresh. I think everyone's kind of trying to figure out where they fit. But with all technology, I mean, it's when we went from film to digital, everyone, there's going to be filmmakers everywhere. Everyone can make a movie because they can just pick up their handheld camera and go make a film. This is the end of the business. And Name me 5 directors who came out of that era. I can name you 2. You're still going to be good. You're still going to be talented. You've still got to be able to tell a good story. So I think it's the same here. I think we're all just kind of, shifting to see where it fits. Are there going to be some people who lose their jobs and have to kind of, sure, but that's with technology in any business. So, that's a really long-winded answer to your question. But if I think there's more things to be scared of as a dad of an actress than there are, than there is of
Fair
AI.
enough. Fair enough. All right. Lower down my threat level on AI. So thanks, Tom. All right. Well, Tom, if somebody wants to check out and follow your work and they want to know more about what you do, where do they go to learn about the latest Tom Butterfield projects?
Thanks for that. Well, my company's called Culmination Productions. We obviously have our website, and both me and my company are on something called IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database. We have a film that came out, 2 films that came out last year called The Critic with Ian McKellen and Gemma Arterton, and then Cellar Door, which was with Jordana Brewster and Scott Speedman, and you can kind of find those on Prime and iTunes and all those fun places. And as I mentioned, I've got a film now which is with Lionsgate, and I'm hoping that'll get a theatrical release early spring of next year. So.
All right. Well, when that is released, we'd love to have you back for another episode to talk about the movie, and that'd be a lot of fun. But Tom, thank you so much for being a guest on Content Kingdom. This has been a phenomenal episode. I hope we answered the question, what the hell do producers really do? I think we did. I think we got there. So,
no, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the chat.
Spring, fall, winter, summer.
Spring.
What do you like to do in the spring?
I love to be out in the sun. I love those kind of gray mornings that turn into sunny afternoons.
Wine, beer, whiskey, coffee, tea.
Well, as I don't drink anymore, I'll say tea. But I'm also English, so it probably has to be tea.
Well, then I guess my offer to give you a beer did nothing to mollify my lateness. So
I'll get you a tea. Beer is fine. An NA beer is fine.
Favorite country outside your home country?
Oh. I mean, it would be obvious to say America because I'm English and I now live here, but I'll be a little different. And Italy.
Where in Italy do you like to go?
Just anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere in Italy. Just give me their food. I would definitely start drinking again and have their wine, just their ethos on life. Just it's such a beautiful country for many reasons.
I'm starting to make my own homemade limoncello. So if you do decide to pick it back up and get off the wagon, then come over and we'll hang out in Austin and do that. Do it yourself or hire someone else?
Do it yourself. I'm not a builder.
Okay.
But I'm a very good assembler.
Favorite books you read as a kid could also count.
Can I just say Shakespeare?
Yes, you can absolutely say Shakespeare. Do you have a particular play you like?
I mean, I love them all, but I'm a huge... There's this really fascinating book called The 11 Original Stories, which basically goes all the way back to kind of the cave drawings and through like Egyptian hieroglyphics and all the way to now in terms of the original story. So man meets woman, woman loses woman. And I think Shakespeare in his plays just took those concepts and just went